questions that I'll be sharing with you whenever we get to the question and answer time. But right now, I'd really like to introduce two principals from Bing Schools, Jana Davis and Vicki Wilson, who participated in an educators and data use workshop that was led by Ellen and Diana, and then have been provided some follow-up technical assistance to implement a data literate culture in their school. And we asked them to share how they began their journey to become this type of school. And we're saying began because I know that they're going to tell you, I know they've told me several times, they're still on this path to get it throughout the whole school. Jana is a principal at Homer Elementary for grades 2 through 5. She began her career as a business teacher and a physical education teacher, and has a bachelor's and master's degree from East Central University, and has been an administrator since 1994. She's also been an educational diagnostician. She's taught in the elementary setting, coaching junior high and high school basketball and softball. And one of the things that I loved whenever I'm visiting with her is she often says, I'm blessed to work with the most amazing people, and together we are making each day the very best it can be for 627 precious students. And her cohort and partner in crime, they work so well together, is Vicki Wilson. She is the early childhood through first grade principal at the same elementary school, and they work so well together. She's been at Bing Schools for 16 years and taught a variety of levels, becoming a principal in 2006. She has a bachelor's degree in business administration from the University of Oklahoma, multiple teaching credentials and multiple subject teaching credentials from Patton University, and a master's degree in school administration from East Central University. She's also received the National Board Certification in Childhood Education. And something I want to encourage you, we've had questions put in the chat pod. Please continue to put them there, and I will capture them and ask our principals and Ellen and Diana toward the end. Are we ready, ladies?
Yes, you're ready.
Okay.
This is Vicki Wilson. I'm sitting here again, as Heidi said, with my co-principal, Jana Davis, and we are lucky to work at Homer Elementary with our 600 students. We're on our 9th year of being co-principals together here at our site. Our school district is a small rural district of about 1,700 students, so we do have challenges of being a small school, but we are lucky to have great school leadership and a superintendent that is very supportive of us, so in all of our endeavors. We are a typical elementary school that, year after year, we work all year and we look at those CRT tests in the spring, and that data is essential to us. Not only does it show up on our school report card in the state of Oklahoma, but it also helps us know every year at the end of the year what students actually, what their proficiency level is in our 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade students. Additionally, the data that we look at year after year is DIBELS data and other data that is required for our Reading Sufficiency Act in our state, in Oklahoma. That data, again, is looked at the beginning of the year and at the 3 benchmarks throughout the year, fall, winter, and spring, to determine which of our students need intervention. So I might just add here that while at the beginning of every school year at back to school staff development meetings, Jan and I would share data with our staff. Often it would be at the beginning of the year that we would share that data, and in hopes of course, having conversations about that changing instruction. But often I think that was an administrator led, and that we knew the data, but we didn't always continue on with making sure that data was used well throughout the school year. What happened, again, we are required by the state of Oklahoma, which is a great thing for our kids that we are required to do this, but those students at our school, grades kindergarten through 3rd grade, who do not meet a benchmark to be on level for reading, we're required to show intervention for those students. Intensive students have to receive an additional 45 minutes of instruction a day in addition to the 90-minute reading block, and our students that have strategic intervention needs receive 30 minutes a day. So we knew that we had to take that data and make a plan for how we were going to provide intervention. So at our school, much of the data has been used to figure out who needs intervention and how to provide it. What happened at our school was we began this school year and had primarily then been sitting those students who needed that extra help, either who didn't do well on the CRT test, who didn't reach proficiency, or students who were not at benchmark level in reading. We would send those students to an interventionist. So while the teachers were involved in knowing which students were going, it was more sending those students out to someone to provide that intervention. And of course, in the classroom, they would do small group things as time allowed, but much of that emphasis was put on the interventionist. Well, our school year began, and we lost a career teacher and had to plug our interventionist into a classroom, and all of a sudden we're without anyone to provide that intervention. So what has happened to us this school year is that we were forced to come up with a different model. And to do that, we of course had to involve our teachers because we didn't have the funds or even the personnel, had we had the funds, to provide that. So all this led us to having to include teachers because all of a sudden there was no interventionist and the teachers had to provide intervention, and we had to figure out how to use that data more practically. It was done by the interventionist before, and I think students, were the responsibility was often shared and teachers didn't feel ownership to it, but all of a sudden we had to rethink intervention as we knew it, and this just happened to coincide, thankfully, with our partnership with the CETL group this year and them encouraging us to look at data more carefully.
I just wanted to interject there. I'm Jana, Vicki's other half, and she is together we some way make a whole. But I wanted to interject. It was so ironic. Vicki and I were sitting in her office in late June, early July, and we were going over, again, our CRT spring test scores, and year after year, we would look at these scores, this post-test data, and we would see those same students year after year. And so we had addressed all of the demographic needs. We knew that these come from homes that didn't have a lot of resources, so we would make sure that they had library books, backpacks that they would take home filled with reading material. We knew they came from homes that lived in poverty, and they were more worried about where their next meal was coming from as opposed to doing their homework. So we made sure they were part of our food backpack program. So we thought we had addressed all of these needs to help improve them, but we weren't. And we were sitting there discussing that this summer, and lo and behold, manna from heaven came down, and we had a phone call from Mr. Crabtree asking if we wanted to be a part of this CETL group. And they had experts in data that would help us, and it was such a blessing. And so we were so thankful that this came about, because there was a need. We weren't using our data correctly. We were using it more, or I was, for curriculum needs, looking how we could improve our curriculum instead of taking it and drilling it down to improve student achievement.
One thing I might just add here, there was some ownership with teachers because, again, as I mentioned, we have a school report card in the state of Oklahoma, and we want to have a good report card. That report card is based primarily on our test scores, our end-of-the-year CRT scores from our students in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grades. And so we did have ownership there from our teachers because they wanted our kids to score well. We wanted to do well. And we also knew that part of that report card was being able to, a component of that score was being able to show gains in our lower 25 percentile of those students. So there was some ownership at the time, but because we all love our school and we love our kids and we want our kids to do well, yet we were passing that on often to the interventionists and thinking, or the special education teachers, I might add, thinking those students will get that extra help outside the classroom, and I'll help where I can. But again, what happened when we lost that interventionist is that the ownership had to change, and we had to encourage our teachers to get on board with us and be willing to change and work differently and to be creative.
And truly, the responsibility of analyzing our data had to shift, and real change we knew was going to have to come from the classroom. And with our new intervention plan that we still had to create, we knew that teachers who had previously used that data to identify students not reading at grade level were now going to have to use that data for what it was truly intended, and that was to form and mold specific instruction to improve student achievement. It went from our office, that data went from our office to the classroom, because now the classroom teachers were actually using that data to form their own intervention and to change student outcome. So it was no longer the responsibility of that reading interventionist. It became teams of teachers working together, sharing strategies, and the buy-in was there. Maybe out of necessity, but it was there.
One of the things I might just interject here, one of the ladies had mentioned earlier that there are some things that really do help teachers have time and opportunity to share data and to plan. And several years ago, Jan and I have been together for 9 years, and one of the things we did shortly after we came, not the first year, we were smarter than that, but a few years in, we did reorganize our entire school schedule to allow for shared plan time. And had we not had that, I don't think we could have begun this process this year nearly as effectively as we have. So we did have that piece available to us where our teachers could sit daily, if necessary, for 45 minutes and have a shared plan time and begin organizing their own data.
And that's how our data analysis really began, because in those grade level team meetings, everyone would bring their own data. And as you can see from that slide, we had numerous sources of data. I think it was Ellen referred to, you feel like you're drowning in all of that data. But the teachers organized it in a fashion for them that it was real to their classroom and real to their students. And there was something visual about seeing that data up there, and I think Mrs. Wilson's going to speak to this in a minute. But as we were in a grade level meeting with fourth grade, it was almost like one of those aha moments. And we had this big yellow sticky note up there, and we were identifying our students from the data that we had. And as we put those sticky notes with students' names up there, one of our fourth grade teachers, the look on her face, it was such a visual for her to see those students. And she said, you know, that student really doesn't work well with that student. And so we started moving students and grouping them together, not only based on their deficits, but how they were able to work together and cooperate. And it was, you could almost see that light bulb come on that, hey, that's what it is, putting groups together that are manageable, that are workable. And so that was, I think that visual appeal was very important for us. And methodically, we used that collection to identify our students and those specific skills, and we formed our intervention groups. And Vicki, would you share about that, what that visual representation looked like?
Yes, what we actually did was that, beginning at kindergarten all the way up, teachers brought in sticky notes, and we lengthened some grade level meetings. We got teachers covered. We even used, the school secretary covered a class. We had everyone covering classes to get us a little bit more time. And we put all of the information. It was easier with my younger students because we were just looking at reading, but I know Jana's group was looking at reading and math, particularly at that time. And we, on the sticky note that had students' name, or students that were at risk for whatever level of risk, it would provide their scores. As far as DIBEL scores, we would put every piece of the DIBEL scores, and they were color-coded even. If they needed intensive intervention, it was red. If they were strategic, it was yellow. And even some kids who did benchmark, but we were still concerned with. And we put all of those sticky notes on the wall, and we tried to figure out, okay, let's organize ourselves, and let's figure out how we can provide services to these kids, how we can provide intervention to these kids. And that actually goes into how we had to make this process work, because we had to find time. Again, we had an interventionist before. Now we didn't have one. The school day looked the same for the teachers, but yet they needed to find time to provide this additional 30 minutes of intervention minimum for these kiddos. So we were lucky, because just this school year, we were able to open our second computer lab on our school site. We, over the last, I don't know how many years, it seems like forever, have sold and sold and sold cookie dough, So our PTO helped us with that, threw in all that money. We found other funding sources, and we have now 2 computer labs. So we can manage about 75 to 100 kids in our computer lab at one time. So we restructured our school schedule, and every grade level had a time to go to the computer lab. So what we decided to do, and the teachers came up with this idea, is find someone to man that computer lab with the kids who are on level and let them then use that 30-minute computer time to work on intervention. In doing so, they restructured how it didn't have to be just their students any longer. All the sticky notes for the entire grade level were on the wall, and we began sorting those students by ability groups or by needs rather than one particular teacher's kids. And so teachers, actually most of my teachers, and I think many of Jana's teachers, are not even providing intervention for their own classroom students. It's students somewhere within that grade level. So we had to have buy-in, though, from student teachers who were helping man the lab. Counselors are helping. We help where we need to, teacher assistants. So teachers were doing now their small groups of no more than 5 students in their classrooms during that computer time.
Speaking of small groups, Vicki, if you would speak to the group about our new students that would come into the school.
That's a good point. One of the things that was always frustrating for teachers, and we've just had this happen after spring break, is students move in, and all of a sudden you're trying to find that student who perhaps may be needy a time with the interventionist, and that schedule is already established. Well, we learned it was much more simple to put that student in with a grouping immediately, and we could immediately meet the needs of any students in our school moving in or out. We used our teacher assistants, as I said, and we also began rearranging to even do some enrichment things, and that's probably another story for another day, but it's allowed lots of opportunities for us. We got very creative. Every minute is used in our school, which we always try to be good stewards of time, but I think even more so now than before.
One of our teachers had asked me that typically our classroom teacher would take their class down to the computer lab and then come back and have intervention. And she stopped by the office one day and she said, "Can we get someone to pick our students up? Because that's taking a couple of minutes to walk down there and walk back, and we really want to get started." So they value that 30 minutes. They see what's happening, and I think that was eye-opening to know that their buy-in was so great that they were willing to give up more of their time just to be with the kids.
One of the things, as Jana said, just the conversations that we're having with teachers that in shared plan time now, the conversations are mostly about sharing intervention strategies among each other, all the ideas they have, all the supplies that they're sharing between them. It's immediate because the kids will move between their rooms at that time, and they'll stand in the halls and shout across the hall to someone, have so-and-so student tell you how they scored today on their oral read. So they're sharing information in shared plan times. They're sharing it across the hall as we're moving around. And I think in those conversations, Jana, your teachers realize something.
And it just happens that I'm doing the intervention for one of the 4th grade groups. And as we were working, one of the skills we had identified, just for an example, was fact and opinion. And as we were working in our groups about fact and opinion, we came together and we were just informally talking in the cafeteria of all places. And I said, you know what, these kids are really getting this. I don't understand why they're scoring low on fact and opinion year after year, because they get it. They understand it. And I said, that what I see is they don't have the vocabulary. And 2 of the other teachers said, "Oh my goodness, that's exactly what we were going to come tell you. Our kids know this. They know what a fact is. They can tell you what an opinion is. They can give you examples. What they get stuck on is the vocabulary. When they read the question in the test, it usually has some vocabulary that they're not aware of. They don't know what it is, and so that inhibits their ability to answer the question correctly. So that became our focus. We changed right midstream of our intervention and realized that vocabulary, that was our greatest need. And so that's been our focus, and I think from what we've been discussing, that's where we're going to start next year.
We're just seeing, I think, that the intervention is just more precise and more deliberate and focused, and that mixing the kids, the groups are just more closely aligned, and kids then have more confidence to speak out, and they're enjoying being with other teachers as well. It's moving kids around our school, and we're just all sharing the process together. As far as monitoring, Jana, you want to just mention that?
But and we were seeing the progress, but we wanted to monitor it to see if what we were doing was effective, what changes we needed to make. And so every 2 to 3 weeks, we do a progress monitoring based on the needs of those students. And we have these large, yellow, oversized sticky notes that cover the walls in our offices and in intervention rooms. But we would take those and put them in classrooms and take the information from the progress monitoring and post it on there to see what gains were being made, which students were moving, which were not. And it's so heartwarming to see those teachers just beaming that their students are, making progress. And even when they're not, they want to know, what can we do? What are you doing?
I know one of the challenges we talked about, and I'll just really briefly mention, we have involved other people outside our classroom teachers to do monitoring on the lower levels for DIBELS particularly, to take that off of teachers, to remove any bias, to make sure that we're matching everything up consistently since we are grouping across a grade level. I know, though, they're doing some very clever things. Ms. Davis, you might mention on 4th and 5th grade, just immediate responses to know about skill mastery.
I think, and too, I heard Ellen mention this earlier about how valuable it is to have the students monitor their own progress. And in 4th grade, we made it a point in our intervention groups to tell them what the goal, what the targets are for reading oral fluency in the DIBELS assessment. And we have those numbers on the wall in big circles. 93 is where you want to start, 105 is where you want to be by the middle of the year, and 118 at that final assessment. And our students, our 4th grade students, have their own little sheet where each day they do test with each other. They test each other on their word list. They time their fluency to see if they're gaining vocabulary and thereby increasing their fluency. So that's something that we have found true too, Ellen, that student buy-in, that student ownership has been very valuable. Our 5th grade, this has really been tailored to fit our needs. And at 5th grade, we had needs at reading and math. And so we used more of a formative assessment rather than checklist or phrases or fluency checks or DIBELS. We used tickets out the door or individual whiteboards, games, any type of formative assessment that would give us feedback on what the students were lacking. And so our intervention groups daily changed based on those formative assessments. And it's very fluid. The teachers find that it's really helping classrooms flow more evenly because those intervention times are catching those gaps, those deficits, and addressing it before the next day's instruction.
And just as she said, even with the older students, it moving, it's being very fluid. Even with the younger students, as we see the progress monitoring, even on DIBELS, once we get a progress monitoring score, we're sticking a little white round circle on that sticky note, putting those scores on and color coding them, so that if we see different groupings need to occur, we can immediately change the groupings of students or move a student in or out depending on how they're doing. Overall, I think the exciting thing here is that it is encouraging change at our school. We're just wading in. We don't have it figured out, but something that we're hearing our teachers say is just, can we start this next year at the beginning of the year and keep going? Ordinarily, teachers aren't as excited to do testing and to get into the year CRT scores as I think they are this year, because we're all anxious to see if even what we've done this year that has just been a beginning in the process will make difference on scores, even on not just CRT scores, but in our student scores on DIBELS and end-of-the-year benchmarking and all of that. Teachers are asking deeper questions. They're investing a lot. The conversation around our school, even in the teacher's workroom, is primarily about student achievement, how students are doing. We're hoping that it's an overarching, not just about intervention, but it's also about what's happening in the classroom, teachers looking more closely at classroom instruction as well. Jana, you might mention your students giving up their time even.
It's like Mrs. Wilson said, it has been a change in our climate because everyone, probably there was a time when intervention was looked at as those kids that didn't get it. Now, it's not. Those kids they're proud to be part of that, and I want to give a shout out to all of our students that do give up their time. We call it pull-out time, but that's non-instruction time when they would go to PE or to music or to library. They give that up voluntarily. There's nothing that says they have to, but they want to go to intervention because as we try to talk in intervention, we're building that confidence. It's not that they can't do it. It's just that we haven't presented it in a manner in which they could get it. So we're really appreciative of our students for giving up that time, for realizing the value of it.
Even questions from our parents, some of them, kids go home and talk about another teacher, and I've even had younger students' parents ask me, did you change their classroom? They're talking about another teacher, and we'll explain the process more to them that, no, we're all sharing this. They're going between places. And I think just all in all, it's building camaraderie among our staff. Not that they weren't already working well together as teams, but you know, you have ownership of every student in your grade level because we're sharing these kids between us, and we have these goals that we've set for ourselves that we're anxious to see if we make them. And our kids are helping. Like Mrs. Davis said, they're giving up their time. Teachers are all in. Parents are sometimes picking kids up a little later from school to be part of some after-school things. And so, all in all, it has been such a good experience.